Oh, thanks.
Okay.
Well, Fred, your name came up because you know that the word pioneer in MMA is thrown around pretty loosely. Like everybody that fights just about is a pioneer. The moment someone crosses 40, they call them a pioneer over here. So, like for me, you know, I look back at I've also been watching UFC since the very first one, and that was what inspired me to get into MMA and start fighting. And you're one of the true pioneers in my mind of mixed martial arts. And you were there from. You kind of took the bath for all of us right in the beginning, where nobody really knew what to expect, and you were the guy that jumped in, and you know, like it was untested. Nobody knew what to expect. So you were a true pioneer of MMA, and for me, you were just as instrumental in the formation of MMA as somebody like Royce Gracie was. So it's you're one of the obvious choices, you know, that we should be chatting to now. So it's really a privilege to have you on air with us.
Well, those are very kind words, and I thank you for them.
All right, great.
By the way, we usually do like an introduction, but I've actually already started the recording. So we might as well just get into it, you know. As usual, my name is Rian. I'm joined by Chris Bright. And we are very fortunate to have Fred with us today, all the way from, you're in Kansas, if I'm not mistaken, Fred.
Kansas City, Missouri. I'm just on the Missouri side of the border.
We're getting people from all over. It's a bit of it was a weird thing because me and Chris were talking earlier today about the time difference, and Chris was like, "Yeah, we can send you the link." And we sent it earlier, and Chris is like, "Oh, we actually arranged with you for 10 o'clock." I think I sent the link to Chris like when it was 7 or 8 on your side, and I didn't want to catch you halfway through breakfast, you know. So we've been made up some time, and I'm really glad to have you here. How are things looking on your side? I mean, we had a quick conversation about the lockdown, but I mean, in terms of how things are running day to day on your side, how are things looking?
Things for me are running fairly close to normal as far as work goes. I still have to go to my job every day, a very, very busy job. My gym, I only have just a very few guys, but we have not been training for probably almost a month now. My training I've been doing on my own as much as possible, trying to stay in shape and stay sharp and not get too far down the road of being a slob. When you're an old guy, it's real easy to get out of shape fast, and it's real hard to get back what you lose. So for me, it's important to stay busy every day.
Look, Fred, I'm just going to be honest. For me, as a younger guy, it's not that difficult to get out of shape either. I'll be quite honest.
It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse.
I train with Chris. We've been close.
I can vouch for that. Yeah, I've been following your whole career, and I'm Facebook friends with Fred, so I've been following what he's been doing for quite a long time. So I'm kind of jumping ahead here. Like, we're not really starting at the beginning, but you had your last MMA fight at 53 years old, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's correct.
And most people are looking to kind of get out of MMA in their mid 30s. You know, they're considering us too old for MMA at mid 30s. And I think I had my last fight at about 45 years old, and I felt like, Jesus, I felt like old and slow. Can you tell us about that? We'll kind of work our way backwards. I think, you know, you don't really need any introduction. What was your experience in the cage in your last outing? How did you enjoy it?
It was very stressful. The actual being in the cage wasn't stressful, but leading up to it, deciding to go back and do it. The reason that I decided to go back and do it was that I was haunted from the inside from still UFC 2. I did so badly there, and I felt strongly that I wanted to at least give one more official fight to try and represent myself in a way that I would not be ashamed of. And a lot of people said, "Oh, this is redemption." In some ways, yes, but in some ways, no. I was not trying to show anybody else so much as to show myself that this is a better representation of me and who I am. And I did not want to go to my grave being 0-1 in the UFC and never having another fight. to me, that would be almost like being a coward, like I was hiding from what happened. And I had thought about coming back and even tried to come back a few times between UFC 2 and that last fight, but somehow things always got in the way and it didn't happen. And I knew that I knew I could still do it. Even at 53 years old, I trained like a madman every day. I was extraordinarily busy, running a gym, training myself, and so physically was not the problem. But for me, the biggest issue is, and it's the same thing that happened in UFC too. The biggest problem was that I'm a private person. I don't do well in front of other people. I'm an introvert, and I get blinded by the lights and the crowd and the cameras and things like that. And for me, when I made the decision to go back and do another fight, thinking about all that, I had to get my mind right, and I had to get myself in a place mentally where I would not freak out when I got in the cage again, because I fight in the gym all the time. We spar hard every Saturday, so at least once a week when the gym is open, we go hard. I still do. I'll be 65 this year, and I still spar with the guys. And there's nobody within 2 decades of my age, and that's okay. I can still do it. So going back for that fight was just for me to feel better inside, and to put the demons to rest inside of me that were haunting me, that I just couldn't get rid of any other way.
And
it's amazing. Sorry, Rian, you go first.
No, what I wanted to check, and no comeback plan for 65. I mean, like you took a big gap between your previous fights. Are any big ones planned for 65, maybe 75 as well, or not really?
The offers are not coming in at a very fast pace, but I will entertain any offer that comes around that has some zeros behind the number. I'm looking for a retirement plan. Like I say, I'm going to be 65 years old. I have no way to retire. So, hey, if anybody wants to put some money on the table, I promise I will fight very hard. I will do really good. I'll earn every penny.
Look, if Mike Tyson can come back, why can't Fred Ettish come back? I mean, there's a lot of talk on that.
Exactly.
Fred, I mean, Mike Tyson on pads, how old is he now? 50, 53, something like
53.
that? 53. Pretty frightening on pads still.
Oh, amazing. He's a very amazing individual.
Yeah, I still don't know if I'd like to stand in front of that.
Nope.
No, I'm not going to stand in front and trade with Mike Tyson.
No, not at 70.
No.
Well, they put money on the table, I'll fight him, but I'm not going to box him.
Yeah, I don't like. It's interesting you mentioned that the body's willing. Your story might be a little bit different, but I think for older athletes, a lot of them, their body's capable, but it's actually the willingness and kind of willingness to bang it out every day, and to put in that hard grind. The younger athletes are very hungry.
Yes.
And to put your body on the line every day. For me, as I get older, it's more and more of it becomes a motivational challenge. And in a way, you were quite fortunate that you had that drive for longer. So in retrospect, I guess if you look back at it like that, that might have fueled you for 15 years, which now is a positive for you.
I think so. I think you hit on something. Because I wasn't doing sanctioned fights, I wasn't going. I didn't have 50 MMA fights. My body didn't take the pounding that it would have taken, and I didn't age like a person my age who was fighting actively for all that period of time would have aged. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference between sparring and rolling in the gym than there is in going in and having 3, 4, 5 hard fights a year where your body really, really takes a pounding. So I've got healthy habits. I've got a healthy lifestyle that would have been better if I'd have learned younger to do these things. But when I was young, I was a little bit crazier, a little bit wilder, wasn't so concerned with with a healthy lifestyle. But I take good care of myself, and so my body's held up really well. I've been fortunate, no catastrophic injuries. I've got aches and pains and things that hurt a little bit, but nothing that I can't push through. And like you say, to go through a fight camp would be a real challenge, and it would take a lot of motivation. It would take a lot of drive to do that. But it depends on how hungry you are, and without any major injuries, I could do it. And I know what a fight camp is like. I went through Pat Militich's system, and when I became an affiliate instructor for him some years ago, we went for 1 week of training that he put us through that would have been the same as any fighter that he put through right before their fight week. Or the toughest week of fighting would be 2 weeks out from the fight, and he put us through everything there. And I was well into my 40s at that time, and I survived that, so I understand what it's like and what's needed.
You speak quite a bit about Pat Militich, and you've obviously got a long-standing relationship with Pat. And ironically, Pat was one of the guys growing up that I would kind of look at, and I saw his MMA, and my style was very different, but I kind of modeled a lot of what I did on Pat Militich. He was just such an inspirational fighter. He was so gritty, and he seemed so likable back in the day. And I think he was probably ahead of his era. Maybe him and Matt Hume. There was a couple of guys around then that were just kind of real standouts. And like Pat Militich looked like a good guy.
Pat's a great guy, and everything you said about him is true. He's not only a great coach, he was a great fighter. He's a great person too. He's very kind, very humble, very generous. He's never let any success go to his head. He's always been very approachable, treats people really well. In the gym, he was a hard coach. He was a hard taskmaster. He pushed everybody, but he didn't push anybody harder than what he would push himself. And he never expected anybody to do anything that he wouldn't go through himself. And his ability to take the elements of MMA and put them together seamlessly was way ahead of his time, in my opinion. He was a great wrestler. He was a great kickboxer. He was a great boxer. He put everything together. He had excellent submissions. A lot of people don't realize how good his submission game is and was. And everything came together. And Pat was the guy that really created a system that was well-rounded. And obviously, we could go down the list of guys that he's trained and went through that gym, and that would speak for itself. But Pat was the mastermind and a genius when it came to MMA.
He was probably one of the first guys to have a truly modern look back in those days. He looked like the current MMA type of fighter, which was Sorry, Arian, where you were.
No worries. Speaking of the training, and like you said, going through Pat's system, and in preparation for your fight, your second fight, what was that? Like you said, you were looking for other fights in between, but now at 53, you get the call. There's a fight coming up. How much time did you have in preparation, and what was that preparation like for you heading into the fight, from a physical and from a mental standpoint?
Well, it was a lot better than having 10 minutes notice at UFC 2. So we'll say that. I had a couple of months of time to get ready. I had contacted a friend of mine, Brock Larson, who also has fought in the UFC. And he's a great fighter, great coach. And he was promoting fights at the time up in my home state of Minnesota. And I asked him if he could get me a fight and put me on one of his cards, and he jumped all over that. So I knew ahead of time. I had plenty of time to prepare. I didn't know who I was going to fight, but that was neither here nor there. For me, the important thing was just to get myself ready and not to worry about who the other guy was. I trained extraordinarily hard, but I modeled the training that I did, even though I wasn't at Pat's gym, to train. I brought in guys, local people here who pushed me really hard, and I modeled the training after the type of training that Pat put me through. The weakest part of my game would be wrestling, so I had two extraordinarily good wrestlers here locally who trained with me anyway, and I made them put me through the grinder and put me in terrible positions that I hated to be in, and try to not only survive those positions, but to understand how to reverse those positions. Did a lot of sparring, a lot of rolling. Conditioning has always been my strong suit, so I didn't have any trouble there. So it was good. I felt exceptionally good physically going into that fight.
I think quite a lot of people don't know when you made your debut in UFC 2, you took it on something like a week's notice, and you kind of, I think you found out 10-15 minutes before the fight that you were actually going to fight on that day.
Yes.
Yeah.
The way that happened was I did not see UFC 1. One of my karate students came and showed me an article in Black Belt magazine, said, "Hey, this is something you would really, really do well at." Because I didn't like karate tournaments because they weren't realistic. There was too many rules, and politics was involved. And the idea of a fight where two guys went in and there was no bullshit. One guy was definitely going to win, one guy was going to lose it, and there was nothing that would get in the way of that. That appealed to me. And then being able to use a wide variety of what you had learned as a martial artist without, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, this is against the rules, that appealed to me too. So I looked at it and I said, oh, maybe you're right. So I wrote a letter to Art Davie, and because back in those days, internet was maybe just brand new, if it was out there at all. I certainly didn't have internet. So I wrote him a letter, mailed it to him, got a letter back saying, well, it's too late now because for UFC 2, the card is already full, but we'll keep you in mind for the next one. And so I kind of forgot about it. And then one Saturday, I came into my dojo, and the answering machine was illuminated, and I got on the machine, and there's Art Davie saying, hey, Ken Shamrock broke his hand, so I have to take an alternate up and put in his spot. Will you come down as an alternate? And so I said, oh, hey, okay. And that was on a Saturday, and it was the UFCs in those days were on Fridays, and so he had to FedEx me the tickets, the plane tickets, so I could get down there on time because he didn't think they'd get there in time for the mail. So it was less than 2 weeks notice of that I was going to fight at all. And I asked him on the phone when I talked to him, I said, will I at least get to fight the other alternate? Because I know in UFC 1, they did that like a preliminary. They had the two alternate guys fight. And he said, no, because UFC 2 is a 16-man tournament. We don't have time for that. The only way you fight is if between now and fight night, somebody gets sick, somebody gets hurt, or somebody doesn't show up. And so I said, okay, well, if nothing else, I'll get a trip to Denver. So I went down there, and Thursday night, the last guy comes in, and that happened to be Johnny Rhodes, the guy that kicked my butt. He was the last guy to show up, and Art came up to me and said, hey, thanks for coming down. Appreciate you, being willing to step up, but everybody's here, everybody's healthy, so we're not going to use you. So I thought, okay, well, that's that. Well, the next day, I had a strange feeling all day, a very uneasy feeling, but I just figured, well, it's just me imagining things. The fight start, and Art Davie is trying to get everything organized because it was chaos. It was the venue had changed at the last minute. There was not enough space for everybody. All the fighters were scattered around, and Art didn't even know where half of them were. And he said, hey, I need you to help me. I need you to go, and whenever I tell you to get whatever fighter, I need you to bring him up here so we can keep the pay-per-view running. So I was running around the arena and across the street at the hotel to try and bring fighters up. And I had just brought up Minoki Ichihara to fight Royce Gracie. I got him where he was supposed to be, and then I was going back to find the next guy. And I'm going downstairs, and Rorion Gracie comes up, and he grabs me by the arm, and he goes, are you ready to fight? And I looked at him and went, what, you mean right now? He goes, yes. Hammaker hurt his hand. He cannot fight. I need you to fight. And I went, okay. And so I had to go find the guys that were there with me, and had to find my gear and find a place to warm up. And then I was in the cage.
You're looking at the way things are planned now. Obviously, we've come a long way. I mean, it's like you said, you had to, as one of the fighters, I can just imagine you look at, for example, yesterday's card, you had Donald Cerrone running up and down to go and fetch Justin Gaethje to come down for his fight. You know, it's like that sort of, you can't imagine that happening now, because it's grown to such a professional level. Now you've got, like you said, you're on your way to go get someone. It's like, okay, do you have your gi? Do you have your stuff? Okay, let's jump in the cage and just go punch someone in the face, you know? It's insane to think that that's how it was run back then. But obviously there were no rules. This was an absolutely brand new thing that was coming up.
Yeah, it was like the Wild West. It was pretty raw, pretty untamed. It was, you know, two guys got in there and fought. One guy won, one guy lost.
What is that saying? Ignorance is bliss. Sometimes it's better not to know.
I was very blissful at the time. So.
And I would imagine with preparation and with the time and to think about a fight, the pressure for your second fight, and on the back of your UFC 2, the pressure on the second fight was so much more. That must have been very heavy.
That was the hardest thing. A lot of people were very reluctant to see me do what I did, especially at 53 years old, and then remembering back at what happened. And some people would say, well, what happens if it goes really bad again? What will you do? And I said, well, you know, first of all, it's already happened to me once. So now I know what to expect. And if it goes bad, it could not be any worse than all the things that people said about me after UFC 2. And I'm mentally prepared for it. And second of all, because I've got that experience behind me now, I know what to expect. It's not going to be a surprise. You always remember your first car, your first kiss, your first date, your first everything. Well, that was my first major fight. And so I had that experience now. So the next one's not going to be so new. The next one's not going to be unknown or unexpected. I mean, what could possibly happen that would be more crazy than what happened at UFC 2?
Yeah, that is true.
I read an article, or I listened to an interview that someone did with you before, where you said that there was what I found interesting was that there wasn't just backlash from MMA fans, but you had a lot of backlash from karate fans as well, where you had people saying you weren't representing MMA fighters well, but also you weren't giving a good representation of karate either. So you actually had just no support coming out of that fight whatsoever. Everybody was sort of like crucifying you for, you know, what happened that night.
You're exactly right. The only real support I had were people that were very close to me in the first place. I had a very, very loyal core group of karate students, and they stuck by me. Nobody quit because of what happened. Everybody was very supportive, very understanding. But everybody else, with a few exceptions, were very mean, very cruel, malicious, and it lasted for so long. I could not believe the intensity of it and the duration of it. And the MMA people would joke about me and make fun of me and make websites that had nothing to do with me, but would be representing like as if it was me. Traditional martial artists, or so-called traditional martial artists, were running away from anything to do with me and saying bad things because they didn't want to be associated with something that went so wrong. And so, yeah, I was, and at the time, it really hurt me. It made me feel very bad, and it was a very depressing situation. Nowadays, as I'm older, I don't let the opinions of others affect me like I did back then. Back then, it hurt a lot more than it would have hurt had I had the mindset that I have today.
You know, I guess You were lucky enough to be a pioneer in the sport of MMA, but then you were unlucky enough to usher in the modern MMA fan. It was, if you look at social media now and the way certain elements of MMA society kind of talk, and they can be very negative and quite aggressive.
Fans can be one extreme or the other. They can be extraordinarily great, and they can be extraordinarily mean and cruel at the swing of a pendulum. It can go either way. And I understand that when you put yourself out and do something in the public like that, if you are willing to accept, if things go well, the accolades that go along with that, you have to be willing to accept the criticism and the negativity. You can't want one and not accept the other. I mean, that's just that's not fair. But on the other hand, for me, everything became so personal. The attacks were personal. Like I said, they were very intense. They lasted for 10 or 12 years before it really started to die down. And I'm not exaggerating one bit. I'd get phone calls, letters, emails, like I said, websites that were very hurtful. And I could not understand why it was me that had to bear the brunt of all that, when pretty much 50% of all fighters that go in there lose, and some lost faster than I did. Some guys tapped out a lot quicker than I did. Why me? But I don't know. Still, everybody has an opinion as to why, but I don't know that I really truly even understand it to this day. But I accept it. It is what it is. And now, for the most part, people are very kind to me, very respectful. I don't know why things changed the way they did, but I like it better this way. So
I do see like a current wave. Whenever there's something new, they kind of attack what was before them. Even, for example, if I look at jiu-jitsu blogs, there's a lot of anti-karate comments from jiu-jitsu and from wrestling. Karate doesn't work. There's a lot of that. And when it comes to MMA, there's a lot of kind of backlash towards traditional martial arts. I guess I don't know if it's symptomatic of society, or if it's just lack of understanding. Who knows? But it's definitely more prevalent now.
Oh, I agree. It is. I think it's a lot of ignorance as to what traditional martial arts really are, what they were really designed to do. And a lot of people have never really seen true traditional karate. They see modern karate. They see karate that's been westernized and turned into a sport, which it was never, ever designed to be in the first place. And it's just, there's a lot of ignorance, and it's hard to get people to see what true martial arts were supposed to be, what they were designed to be, when they look at it through a sporting lens. I mean, the two things are different. For example, when I teach traditional karate and traditional weapons training, and I teach MMA, not together. They're different. They're separate entities. There is some crossover, but for the most part, they're two completely separate things, and that's the way I teach them.
I think if somebody does MMA now and they go in ill-prepared, it's inexcusable, because there's so much information and you know what's expected now. But
Yes.
Back then it was a different thing. It was pitted as style versus style, and karate versus kung fu. That was the whole build up to it. So,
Right.
So you put your hand up to be that guy to go and test yourself. So I find that admirable.
Thank you. You're right. Now, if somebody wants to be an MMA athlete, they have so many gyms that they can choose from that have all the aspects of MMA. They have the jiu-jitsu or catch wrestling, whatever their art of choices for the submissions. They have wrestling. They have Muay Thai. They have kickboxing. They have anything and everything. That most of the time now you can find a gym that has it all under one roof. You don't even have to travel around. Back in the beginning, that was not possible. Nobody knew anything about MMA, and there were no gyms that specialized in it. Like you say, it was a karate guy that would go with a wrestler against a judo guy, and then of course the Gracies. So now, if if you were to take a fight now and not be well-rounded, then that would be your fault, because you have a huge menu of options now that were not available back in the beginning.
Yeah.
I think a funny thing with what you're bringing up now as well, what you guys are discussing, is the role of traditional martial arts, and you've got the MMA training, and I think there's a level of understanding amongst fans because they've seen the different kinds of people coming together now, and I think that, like you said, Fred, you get a lot more respect now. People are a little bit more understanding, because I think the sport has evolved to the point where people get that it's not. You still get these meatheads that walk around and go, I train UFC, you know, that they think they're really strong and they're tough. But there's a lot of people that follow the sport more, that realize it's not, MMA isn't something that it's something that's become an entity in itself now, but it's exactly that. It's a mixture of traditional martial arts that have come together. And you have to now find, like you said, you can get everything under one roof now. But I mean, you still get a bunch of ignorant people that just think it's one thing and you just want to see people punch each other. And then you get people that are really into the technical aspects of watching a fight between two amazing grapplers or watching a fight between two amazing boxers, and you see the technical aspects of it. And from your side, do you still, how closely do you still follow MMA? I mean, what is your, do you still watch the UFC events? What is your takeaway from, or what's your interest in the sport nowadays?
I remain very, very interested in it. I watched last night whatever I could see on ESPN Plus, not the pay-per-view because I don't have enough money for the pay-per-view. And I won't go to a bar and watch it because there's where you find your meatheads. And I can't stand to sit around and listen to a drunk guy say how tough he is and how this guy up there is no good. He's a coward. He should have done this. He should have done that. If I was in there, I would have do this. I would do that. And it just drives me crazy. So I can't go. Plus, I don't drink much anyway. I'm a one beer man. I'll have one beer, and then it's hard to nurse one beer for 3 hours. They throw you out of the bar because you're not spending enough money. So yeah, it's. But last night I remember watching Charles Rosa fight Bryce Mitchell. That was the most amazing grappling match I'd seen in a long time in an MMA fight. Bryce Mitchell just absolutely dominated Charles Rosa, who is great on the mat, absolutely a phenomenal fighter. And just watching the transitions and the control and just the technical wizardry of Bryce Mitchell, just, man, to me, of the fights that I was able to see, that one I enjoyed, almost even more than Nico Price and Vicente Luque, which was a real, the whole different kind of battle. It was almost all on the feet, but just the technical beauty of what happened in the Bryce Mitchell fight was just amazing to me. That's one I'm going to watch over and over again.
If I'm not mistaken, I saw the results because before we started the call, I was catching up on some of the fights and watching them, and I haven't gotten to that one yet, but I checked the results. That was a very, very one-sided decision. I think there was more than one 10-8 round, if I'm not mistaken, in that fight.
I think the scores were mostly 30-25.
Yes, that's insane. That's hectic.
Yeah, that's incredible domination, especially when you look at the pedigree of the guy who got dominated, Charles Rosa. An extraordinarily good fighter. Especially on the ground. But he just didn't have an answer for anything. He's a tough guy, and he didn't get submitted. And Mitchell almost had him in a head and arm choke, 5 or 6 times. Same with the twister. He almost caught another twister, and it was incredible. That Mitchell was able to do that, but that Rosa was able to not tap out too. Both guys, but it was very, very dominating.
If you're looking at modern MMA, so you might find a mixed martial artist that actually has no proper martial arts per se background. So you might have a boxer or a Muay Thai fighter, which is with a wrestling background. So technically speaking, they're not coming from any what you'd call a martial art. And as I see the guys develop in the UFC, most of the guys coming through are become quite respectful and conduct themselves in a martial arts manner. Now, modern martial arts society, they're promoting people for trash talking, and people get forced in a direction to earn more and more money. Like, what is your take on that?
Oh, that's a hard question to answer, because I understand that it's largely an entertainment-driven business, and that the more trash talk and the better you talk trash, the more money comes in. You sell more pay-per-views, the live gate is better, you get more endorsements, and I understand that. But on the other hand, the old school guy that I am, and the traditional way that I look at martial arts, you don't do those things. You're quiet, you're humble, you let your performance, your manifestation of your art do the talking, and you don't call people names, you don't insult people, you don't insult their wives, their families, their religions, you don't call names, So I don't know, there has to be a happy medium in there somewhere where you can, for the general fan. I think for the hardcore fans, for like myself, and I could care less if I ever heard any trash talk from anybody. I want to see two well-trained fighters go in there, do the best they can, and the best man or woman wins. I don't need to see two fighters standing in front of each other, just pounding on each other without any defensive tactics or strategy. I mean, I know that's exciting, but to me, it's more entertaining, and it's more exciting to see a guy that can make you miss and make you pay, or a guy that can take you down and dominate you on the ground through technical brilliance. A guy that can come back from being dominated and come back and win a fight because of his guts and his perseverance and his discipline. Or and on and on and on I can go there. I love the challenge of the fight, and to me, when even in the gym, when I spar, but in my few fights, I don't look at it as I'm fighting somebody else per se. That the opponent is a vehicle for me to improve myself. They're a tool. They're a challenge that I have to overcome. And it generalizes to life. In life, you get thrown so many different challenges and things that don't go your way that you have to figure out a way to overcome. And a fight teaches you that, because when some guy is dominating you on the ground, you have to figure out how to get up. If he's beating you up on the feet, you have to figure out how to take him down. If he's trying to submit you with great submissions, you have to understand, how do I not get submitted? How do I reverse? How do I get back up? How do I overcome this set of problems? And that person represents that. And that generalizes into life. And that helps in every aspect. So yes, you need to be successful. You need to quote unquote beat the other guy, but it's more overcoming your own weaknesses, your own shortcomings, your own challenges, and being victorious from within yourself, more so than quote unquote beating another human being.
It's a very like you say, it's a very traditional martial artist way of looking at it, because I think everybody nowadays is, like you said, it's not to sound too philosophical, but you need to conquer the self before you can conquer any outside influences. And I think that's where a lot of the casual fans, or the people that are not as invested in the sport, get it wrong, where they just want to see two guys stand in the middle of a ring and just swing haymakers and try and knock each other out. There's no technicality in it. There's no understanding of the dynamic of the sport at all. It's just people want to see violence, which is unfortunate, because they miss a lot of the nuances of the sport and of the different what's the word I'm looking for, the different disciplines that go into creating a complete fighter. So I mean, there's a lot that goes missing on people that don't understand the aspects of, or the discipline of, karate. I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So I mean, there's a lot of that going into that. So there's a lot goes missing, or a lot is lost on people that don't understand it from a martial artist point of view.
I agree. And also how much more difficult it is and how much more time you have to invest to be good at those skills, to have good defensive skills. The hardest things in stand-up to teach people is defense, head movement, foot movement, evasion, not getting hit, making somebody miss and countering them. On the ground, it's how do I not only not get submitted myself, but how do I turn that into an advantage and submit somebody? So the skill levels that are involved in the technical aspect of it are so high, and the conditioning that is required of it is so high that people who don't understand it, it's a shame, because they're missing the beauty, they're missing the art and the science of what goes into making a really great fighter great. Yes, it's great to be tough, and we like tough guys and tough gals. We like people who go out there and are gritty and tough, and you have to have that too. That's got to be an element of it. But to me, it can't be the only thing. And plus, it's what's it going to do to your brain? What's it going to do to you long term, health-wise? So I so much appreciate fighters who embrace the totality of all of the martial arts that go into making MMA what it is, and can institute what they want to do, and not just stand in front of somebody else and just punch until somebody drops.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. So you're kind of preaching to the choir. We was talking about the trash talk. We spoke to Craig Jones a couple of days ago, and I don't know if you follow submission grappling. I don't know. I'm not sure if you're aware. You know who Craig is, but he's, for the guys that don't know, him and Gordon Ryan are probably the two best submission grapplers in the world, and their profiles are really high. So their social media following is amazing. Mm-hmm. But compared to a lot of other guys, Craig's taken the high road. So he's really made an effort not to trash talk. He's kept it, like the most he ever gets on social media is kind of cheeky. Like he pokes little jokes at people, but it's never disrespectful, and it's always kind of polite and friendly. And interestingly, it's become like a breath of fresh air, because everyone's kind of taking the Conor McGregor route. And then when someone comes along with something different, it becomes a bit more interesting and intelligent.
Yeah, no, I appreciate and respect that. That's the type of person I really hope finds great success, because to be able to just let your performance do the talking, to me, that's so much louder than any trash talk could ever be. And when you're good, why do you have to be insulting, and why do you have to act like a crazy man or a crazy woman? Yeah, if you're good, let that be your calling card. Let that be your advertisement. And of course, like we said earlier, you have to do something a little bit. You have to make people interested, casual fans, because you have to draw them in, because they spend the money, and it takes money to keep things going. I understand that, but when you go to extremes, I mean, to me, it's bothersome. I really don't like it.
It must be quite a burden as well, because I think it puts a lot of pressure on your shoulders. The reason when I fought, I never really spoke, and it wasn't because I can be a bit of a bastard. So Rian will know I'm not always the easiest guy. But the reason I didn't say anything is because the more you say, the more people want you to fall. And it's a longer way to fall if you've had more to say. So it's just best to shut up and show up.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I don't know, in this sport, you have to have pretty big balls to talk that much, because somebody's going to beat you sooner or later, and nobody's going to be undefeated. Even Khabib, sooner or later, somebody's going to beat him. Look at what happened to Fedor. Somebody beat him, and then he started losing. And these are great, great, great fighters. I'm not saying that they're necessarily trash talkers, but you take a Conor McGregor who built an empire on talking trash, well, then he got handled, he got throttled. And to me, that would be that it's a long way down when you've talked your way up that high. So
Yeah,
I don't know how you could not be humble and be in this sport when you know somebody's going to beat you.
I'm sure for a lot of them, though, from what I hear as well with the big guys, it's a lot of it is a persona and it's a complete act. And as soon as the camera's off, they're different guys. And that's my experience of a lot of guys. And ironically, a lot of the guys that play it humble are not as humble as they pretend to be.
Yeah, it can go either way.
Yeah.
That's interesting though, because when things were really bad for me, when people were saying all the things that they were, and it was at its worst, none of the fighters that were big at the time, and I met a lot of them and I talked to a lot of them, none of them ever said negative things. None of them. And I was always kind of refreshed by that the true fighters, the old time guys back in the day, you know, they were not negative towards me at all. Everybody that I talked to, all of the other fighters were very good to me. It was just the fans.
My debut, and I kind of started. Sorry, Rian, I'm cutting you off again. I always do this to him.
No, go ahead.
I made my debut in MMA probably 99 or 2000. And I was also coming off a pure, like a traditional martial arts. I was a judo guy and I had no experience in striking. And I remember it was in a ring, but it was Pride Rules. And we had neoprene, basically like a wetsuit material on as gloves. So it was very rough as well. Soccer kicks and stomps and everything. It was 1 15-minute round and then 5 minutes overtime, if I'm not mistaken. And again, ignorance was bliss. You know, I didn't have any idea what was about to happen. And I remember for me, the overwhelming feeling of the intensity, you know, compared to any kind of wrestling or sparring that you've done, when a guy's trying to knock your head off as opposed to going pretty hard, it was chasmic. I can't explain to people the shock to the system if you've never experienced that before, where someone's like trying to actually knock you out. So I can only imagine your experience, you know, when you're going back to UFC 2. So what was your first thought or first experience in the opening moments of that fight? Like, I don't know if you can remember what was going through your head.
I remember walking to the cage and the cameraman going behind me and all this artificial smoke and the music and the crowd. And I remember walking into the cage and the cage door going shut, and I looked across and there's this big angry looking dude on the other side there. And after that, I don't remember a whole lot. I remember John McCarthy, who's become a very good friend of mine, a man I respect and admire greatly. I remember him talking to, you know, the pre-fight. But when the bell rang, or I don't even know if a bell did ring, but when the fight started, I pretty much don't remember anything. I remember getting hit. I got hit over the eye, and I thought that it detached my retina because I couldn't see out of one eye. It was completely like looking through a glass of milk. It was completely white. I had no vision in that. And I remember wiping it, thinking, oh, it must be blood in my eye. And then I remember thinking to myself, well, you idiot, blood's not white, so it's not blood. So I was part of what I was doing was trying to survive long enough to try and get that to clear, because when I was on the ground, I'm looking up, I still can't see out of that one eye. And then after that, I don't remember tapping out. I didn't intend to tap out. It wasn't a conscious thing. I told my corner that if they threw in the towel, if I was still conscious when I got out of there, I was going to kick their ass, because I did not want to tap out, or I did not want them to throw in the towel. I wanted to be in control myself of what happened and make those decisions for myself. So it was a long time before I actually looked at the fight again on video, and I saw that I actually did tap out. And I'm not happy that I did, but I guess that's the way things go. But yeah, it was the whole experience was really surreal. And in the end, I remember waiting to walk out of the cage, and I caught a bunch of shit for this too. People thought I was waiting because I thought I was going to be interviewed after the fight, and they said, "Why did you think you were going to be interviewed? You idiot! You did so bad. You're a pussy and all this other stuff." And I'm thinking, no, I just didn't want to walk past the interview because I was trying to be polite. I didn't want to interrupt because they were interviewing Johnny Rhodes, and I was just waiting for him to leave so I could go out behind him and not, be in the way of the interview. So that's the few things that I remember. And if I remember, another thing I remember is I think I was on my knees and Johnny had me behind the neck in a clinch and he was throwing knees at me, and I remember blocking most of the knees with my forearms. But that's just kind of the spotty memory that I have of it. And as far as the eye goes, it was many, many, many years later, I went for an eye exam where they take a picture inside your eye, and the doctor said, "Well, you shouldn't have macular degeneration in that eye, but it looks like you do." And I got to thinking, I said, "Could that have been from trauma?" And he said, "Have you ever been hit that hard?" And I laughed. I said, "Oh yeah, I've been hard." I described to him what happened, and he said, "Wow." He says, "Yeah." He said, "I think that's probably what it is." He said, "I tell you what we're going to do." He says, "I'm going to draw a circle around this picture, and every year when you come in, if that spot gets bigger, then you have macular degeneration. But if it doesn't," he said, that's from you getting hit." And that's what it was from, because it never got any bigger. And that's my souvenir from UFC 2, is I've got a bruise or a scar inside my eye that'll never go away.
That's quite a hard shot.
Yeah, it was a weird feeling. Like I said, it was like scuba diving in a glass of milk when I couldn't see. I was like, why? It was all white.
And it's a funny thing as well with the bravado after a loss. And I've been there. My last fight, I actually got knocked out, and I was walking out of the cage, and everybody was like, my wife and some friends were there to see if I was okay, and I was like, no, I'm fine, and I kept walking into chairs. And there was a straight walk back to the medical suite, and I kept turning and walking into chairs. I did it about 3 or 4 times. I'd try to turn, and the guys would steer me, and no, this way. I'm like, no, I'm nothing to see here. So I guess it's like a normal thing. It's like, you've lost the first battle, you're definitely not going to lose the second one.
Yeah, I understand.
I was laughing. I remember shortly after Chris coming back from that fight, he told us like he doesn't remember getting knocked out, but he remembered the medic waking him up, and they were like, "Where are you?" And he said, "I'm here." Like that's the answer they were waiting.
Who can argue with that?
I needed a couple of seconds just to process before I answered. I didn't have anything else at that stage. I think it's natural to like kind of rue the loss, and more so for you because you had one fight in 15 years. You didn't have another opportunity a year later to shake it off. And for the current fighters, it hurts, and it hurts really badly because they invest so much of their lives and so much riding on it. But for the most part, they get another opportunity 6 months later or a year later. They can recover, train, go again. And you didn't really have that.
No, back then there was maybe 3 UFCs a year, 3 or 4 a year. And I had been told that I was going to be brought back for a subsequent UFC. And of course that never happened. I wrote Art Davey a letter and asked, hey, can I come back and try it again? And never heard back from him. So I guess it wasn't in the cards, but as the sport started to grow and different organizations started having fights, there's a couple of times a gentleman named Clyde Gentry III who wrote a book about the history of MMA. I became friends with him. He wrote kindly about me in his book, and he was involved in a promotion and also a magazine called The Ultimate Athlete. And I was going to go fight for him, and then that didn't pan out, which might have been a good thing because that was the one out in the desert in California that they had a riot out in the crowd during the fight. So maybe I wasn't meant to be there for that. I don't know, but there's been a couple of times that I tried to go back, and it was 15 and a half years before
everything worked out pretty well there.
It was okay. Like I said, I didn't know the young man that I fought. Didn't even really know who it was going to be until a couple of days before. I knew I was going to have a fight because Brock promised me, yeah, we're going to get you a fight. Don't worry about it. We'll have an opponent for you. And it didn't matter to me who it was. I just wanted to fight. But I knew all the things, and probably every fighter is this way. I knew all the things I wanted to do when I got in there. I knew I wanted to show all of my well-rounded skills. I wanted to show that I could fight anywhere, and I wanted it to look really good. And I went in there, and it got ugly really fast. And then I finally thought, I'll piss on it. I just want to get this over with. And so I reversed the guy, got on top, and got lucky and got the win. But I got clipped one time, and that's when I decided, you're going to screw around in here, and you're going to let it slip away. So quit screwing around and just fight this guy, and don't try and show off. So
that's one thing I also wanted to touch on. Like you had this, you came from a pure karate background. Your first fight, you had this 15 years. You had at that point then met up with, started training with Pat. What other martial arts? Because then you started training real MMA. What other martial arts did you start focusing on a lot more? And there you are, Chris. I was wondering what was going to happen with
it's getting dark. Sorry about that.
So what I wanted to get to is, what other martial arts did you start incorporating and start focusing on? And did you get to a certain level at some of them? My personal interest is obviously jiu-jitsu. Did you do a lot of rolling, a lot of wrestling, and did you go through a grading process in those as well to reach a certain level?
I did a lot of work with wrestlers. I'm very, very lucky. I've got wrestlers around me here in Missouri. Missouri's the Midwest of the United States is very strong in wrestling, and there's a lot of great wrestling programs around. And I coached a lot of wrestlers for their MMA, and in turn, I had them help me with the wrestling. I brought in wrestlers to help me for my second fight. I shouldn't say brought in, they were already training with me anyway, but I had them become the trainer instead of the trainee. I've done quite a bit of jiu-jitsu, but I've never been graded in anything. I've done a little bit of gi jiu-jitsu, but not a lot. I'd like to do more, but it's only so many hours in a day. There's only so much that I can do. But most of my jiu-jitsu has been no gi. I've brought in guys to my gym to actually handle that part of the programming, because I realized that, if I'm not at a certain level to be able to teach something, I still want my students to be able to have the benefit of good instruction. So I'm not so big-headed and egotistical that I think I can't bring anybody in. For a long time, I had a great submissions guy, a great jiu-jitsu guy come in. His name is Joe Duran. Probably nobody's ever heard of him, but he could submit a guy from any position, anytime he wanted. He's just the most amazing guy. You wouldn't think so. He's very, very subtle about it, but all of a sudden you're tapping like the fish in the bottom of a boat. The guy was just great. And of course, I worked out at Pat's, and Pat had some jiu-jitsu guys out there. I worked some with Brock Larson, another guy named Jared Garabend up in Minnesota, who were extraordinary jiu-jitsu guys. There's a gentleman here in Kansas City who I brought in for several years to handle extra jiu-jitsu training for my gym. His name is Travis Conley. He's a black belt, extraordinary jiu-jitsu guy, and also an excellent wrestler too. So I've tried to round out what I consider to be the weakest areas of my game to not only build myself up, to provide for my gym, better training.
That's cool. Something else that you mentioned earlier as well, and this is now moving away from the training a bit. You mentioned that you obviously still have a hand in the gym where you're a coach, but you mentioned that you work a job. You're in essential services. What exactly do you do outside of the training? What is your actual, I want to say, your 9 to 5, 8 to 5 job?
I wish it was 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, but I'm on salary, so they take advantage of a lot more than 8 hours a day. I work for the Salvation Army. I don't know if I think there probably is a presence in South Africa.
Yeah, there is.
What my job is, I've been with them for just about 7 years now, and I've had this, I think, my 5th different job for them. I think they keep moving me, trying to see where I do the least damage. I'm not sure. But right now, I did a lot of work with homeless people. First, it was just chronically homeless people. Then I worked with homeless veterans, and I worked housing homeless veterans on the Salvation Army. I worked getting homeless veterans housing in the community. I worked in a drug and alcohol rehabilitation unit. And now for the past year and a half, I've been the facility manager on the property, where we have 3 large buildings, and we have up to in the neighborhood of about 60 homeless people, veterans and non-veterans living. Some of them in drug and alcohol rehab, some of them are homeless, and our job is to try and help them get from our place and prepared to be back out in the community and to be successful. I work in the buildings and the grounds with maintenance, pretty much everything that goes on, transportation. When I was in the Marine Corps, we always said that every unit has to have a shitty little jobs officer, and that's me at the Salvation Army. Everything that goes wrong, it somehow, some way, shape, or form, I end up having to do something about it.
It's quite, it's terrible that anybody should be homeless. Not to mention veterans, but it seems to be an epidemic.
Yes, I'd like to think it's getting better, especially on the veteran side of things. We're not seeing as many homeless veterans as we used to. There's a large, in this country, been a large effort to reduce veteran homelessness, and there's been a lot of resources directed towards that end. And I think to some degree we've reduced the numbers. They're still out there, and if there's anybody homeless that doesn't choose to be homeless, I think that's terrible. And if there's a way to help them, then I'm all for it. Helping people to help themselves, I think, is a great thing to do.
Is it quite PTSD related, or just like an inability to fit back into society?
Yeah, both. It's very individual. There's a lot of PTSD. There's a lot of people who go from a military environment to a civilian environment, which is very, very different lifestyle, and the adjustment is very different and difficult. Some of them have drug and alcohol problems, which may or may not be related to the PTSD. There's a lot of people with mental health problems, different diagnoses of mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, other things. So it's just a wide milieu of different things that go into, creating the problems for people.
It's quite an interesting topic, and I suppose it's a whole conversation by itself. But I wonder if there isn't some. I know a lot of ex-fighters also they battle to fit into society once they're finished with their any combat sports careers. You get such highs and such lows, and I know a lot of people go from this and they kind of head into other issues afterwards.
It's from a fighter's perspective, it's difficult, I think, for somebody. I only had 2 fights, but you talk about guys who fought for 10, 15, 20 years, and that's all they did, or the primary thing that they did. And when that comes to an end, if you haven't prepared yourself for that end of that part of your life, how do you replace it? My God. I mean, the training, all the structure and the discipline and the sacrifice of the training, the highs of winning, the lows of losing, the camaraderie of the team, your teammates, your coaches all around you. When all that comes to an end, what do you replace that with? Man, that's tough. You have to, I would think, as they start to see that, I'm thinking about maybe to retire at this age, they should be building themselves something outside of fighting so that they can transition to something that, even if it doesn't replace all those things, it gives them something else to focus on so that they don't feel lost. Obviously coaching is something, but it's hard to make a living coaching unless you're at the upper echelon, because it's a lot of overhead, and I don't know that the income is all that great for a professional coach. So it's sad to see a person that was once one of the best in the world, one of the elite of the elite, and then you see them years later and they have no money. Their physical health is so poor. They don't feel good about themselves. That's a sad thing. And MMA, especially the old guys, they didn't make a lot of money, so they really didn't have the ability to put away a lot because they weren't getting paid a lot. And so now, and for the most part, a lot of these guys are forgotten by the fans too. And that's another thing. You were once recognized as this magnificent fighter, and all the fans knew you. Now, modern fans don't know most of these guys. They don't know who they are. They're not recognized, and there's a sense of loss right there, because these guys helped to build this magnificent sport now that everybody sees and everybody enjoys, but nobody recognizes that it wasn't always what it is now. It started from nothing, and it was built by some very key people who are now long forgotten by everybody but the hardcore fans. And that, to me, that's very hurtful for guys that sacrifice so much.
And it's tough to prepare for that, I think. Being in especially with the addition of media and the kind of hype that follows mixed martial arts around now, once you get swept into the vortex of media and attention, I think once that's lacking, it can be something. I think that's why a lot of people retire and then come back and retire and come back. Not necessarily money's one thing, but to get that attention, to be relevant, I guess, is a thing.
Yeah, I think that's a key right there. Is they lose their relevancy, and so they come back so that they can feel relevant again. They can feel like they matter, and that they're once again important, and they're not forgotten. So.
My mentor is a great cricketer, and he's retired, Kepler Wessels. And if you ask him about his career and you ask him whether he's satisfied, he'll always say, yeah, he's very satisfied. He had a good career. And as a retired fighter, it's not something I can relate to, because if I could turn back the clock a couple of years and fight again, I would always do that. So it's like a different, I never understand. How can you be satisfied with your career? How do you not want more? And when he got out, he was ready to be out. And I could have done with another couple of years, because I never got what I wanted out of it. I think MMA and combat sports is a bit like an abusive relationship, like it stings a lot of the way, but you keep going back, right?
Yeah, well, that's a good analogy. I like that. That's good.
I think something that a lot of the younger new generation of fighters see a lot is, you see all these guys that are now making a lot of money in it, and investing it in certain things. You've got a lot of guys that have got either their own gyms, or they have their own clothing lines, or you've got a Conor McGregor that's launched a brand of whiskey or a clothing line or whatever. I think the guys are becoming a lot smarter with their money. And I'm looking back at you get your older fighters, but you also look at, I know from talking to a lot of rugby players around here as well, is you've got a very limited career. You can't do this until the day, well, unless you're Fred Ettish, and you can do it until you're 53, so it's just amazing. But I mean, a lot of these guys, you started fighting. Your first fight was around the time that a lot of guys decide to retire, in your late 30s. Where, a lot of these guys retire. I know Henry Cejudo, after his fight tonight, he's 33, and he said he's done. He's retiring. He's stepping back. So, I mean, these guys, their careers are like mid-30s, maybe until they're 40, 45. But you've got a very short career. So you need to prepare, because you retire essentially at 40, not at 65, 70. So there's a lot that goes into that. You need to be smart with your money, or you need to get someone on your team that is smart enough to work with your money.
Right. Yeah, getting people around you that won't just tell you what you want to hear, but will kind of keep you honest and keep you in reality. There's a really good fighter here in Kansas City. He's fought in the UFC several times, James Krause. He's been very smart, from what I understand. He's sunk money into different business ventures, and he's preparing himself for when he's not professionally fighting anymore. He's got a very, very successful gym. I think he's put money into different cellular operations, cell phone stores. And so I love to see that, because that way you know that when a guy is done, he's not going to be desperate. He's not going to feel like, oh, I have to go back. He'll end up being so busy, doing other things that he's good at and things that he loves. I know he loves to be a coach, and he's an exceptionally good coach. So I think a guy like that will transition out of the fight game, or out of that active fighter phase of the fight game, and into other areas, and he'll do just fine. So, and that's good to see. See young guys that won't hang on too long and won't take damage that they shouldn't have to take, and still be okay.
Yeah,
And that's
sorry, Rian.
No,
I get people message me. You carry on.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add, and that's if you're lucky enough to fight, to end on your own terms. There's a good chance that you can get a disabling injury. You get someone that breaks their neck or breaks an arm or something that they cannot continue. So the preparing for your future that's only if you're fortunate enough to do that, and your career doesn't stop prematurely.
Very true. Very true.
I was saying that I get people that will message me randomly and say, listen, I lost my job. I've never trained MMA before. How long will it take till I can earn a living from being a fighter? So I'm like, my friend, I've got bad news for you. It's going to take a while, and you have to be very, very good. But I think Cejudo, speaking about him specifically, he's a very clever businessman. So I wouldn't be shocked if we don't see it's one of these retirements, and he'll take a year and then come back again for a lot of money.
Yeah. I'd be surprised if this is really a retirement. Maybe it's more of a furlough or a vacation. But as with the success that he's had, and being as young as he is, and I don't know him personally, obviously, but he seems like a person who really relishes the competition. He's been a competitor all his life. He was a competitive wrestler, obviously at the highest levels, extraordinarily successful, rose to the top of the MMA world. On one hand, he feels like he's succeeded and done all that he can do. But on the other hand, a person that's wired that way, that has that competitive drive, that fire inside of him, and he still has all the physical gifts that he has, man, I don't know. I'd be surprised. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't come back.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I saw an interview, going back 2016, 2017, you're on a blog and you were speaking about your MMA team and some of your guys that had come through. Do you still have a team? Do you take guys to fight? Have you got guys out there still?
I haven't had an active fighter for a while. I had one guy who did MMA for me who was great. I mean, this guy was a guy that I thought was going to actually make it to the elite level. My plan for him was to get him up to a certain level and then pass him on to Pat Miletich, because Pat was still coaching at the time, and have Pat take him the rest of the way. But he ended up getting married, having 4 kids and a career, and so that kind of fell by the wayside. But he came back in December to do a charity. It was a real fight. It was a regular fight, but it was kickboxing and not MMA. And he donated all of the proceeds from his fight to a nonprofit organization to prevent human trafficking. And
wow.
So that was the last. He was a very popular guy here locally. He sells hundreds of tickets, and he's an exciting fighter. He almost never went to a decision. He was 10-0 as an amateur, and he won his only pro fight. Nice looking guy, very popular. Promoters loved him because he'd fill up the arena, and he was the last guy that I had fight. But there was quite a distance between him and the other ones too. So for a while we were very active, had a good sized team. We were very successful, but slowly over time, it started. People started to move away and do different things, and new people weren't coming in. So
think it's tricky when you as a coach have a life of your own and a business, and you're not able to drive that the whole time as well. It gets very difficult.
Yeah. I tried just running the gym for a while, and it was a great lifestyle, and I was always in good shape, and I was happy, but I was also very, very broke and couldn't make ends meet. So I ended up having to go back and get more work.
Yeah. And after lockdown, you're still coaching and taking classes. You're obviously going to go back to that.
I'll go back. I don't have my own gym. I rent space inside of somebody else's gym. As soon as I get the green light, which might be as early as tomorrow, they're starting to relax some of the restrictions now here where we're at in the States. In the meantime, I trained on my own a lot. I never miss a day of doing some kind of training. I have to stay on top of things. There's, to stay in shape, and then also there's always so much more to learn, and I want to keep growing and keep learning. And the traditional martial arts, you can do a lot of solo training. You need a partner. You can't just train solo and get everything that you need, but you can continue to grow and learn and improve on your own to a certain degree. So, and I've got a friend who teaches in a very large dojo, and so we could maintain the correct spacing and still do a lot of things together. So once a week I would get together with him. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. I know Kepler, for example, still boxes and rolls and does gym every single day. And I'm not sure exactly, but I think Kepler is probably 60 or 61 now. He trains like 3 times a day, every day, doesn't miss it.
I like that.
Yeah, he's really kind of a driven guy. Yeah. I think he trains more than I do.
Yeah, well, that's good. I know training is probably the biggest part of my life that keeps me sane and keeps me fulfilled and happy and relieves my stress and just basically makes my life worth living. Keeps me away from being a person with bad habits. I don't have time for bad habits as long as I keep training, and I don't have the mindset to fall into bad habits, because I always want to train. I always want to learn. I always have another goal, training wise, of things that I want to accomplish. So I can't fall off and drink too much or do destructive things when I have these goals that I set for myself.
I think for me as well, the things that we miss the most, like I'm slowly starting to go back to work now, actually working at the offices, and my 3 biggest things I mentioned a while back is I miss going to the beach, I miss having barbecues with my friends, and I miss rolling probably the most, because I'm used to training like 3-4 times a week, and I usually get beat up by Chris. So, I mean, that's the one positive out of this, that I don't get, snapped in half most of the day. But it's one of the things that I miss a lot, is just that being in that environment with friends. Like, we do training every day at home. I mean, it's great. But being in that environment with besides my family, those are some of the people that I spend the most time with, and not seeing them and not training with them as we. It's physically, I can feel the difference, but also mentally, you start missing these people.
Oh, yeah.
You can't get to them, So that's the one thing that I'm really looking forward to getting back to, is just training. And, I be honest, I'm really glad I get up in the morning and my neck doesn't get stiff and I don't have problems with my shoulder anymore. But I kind of miss that too, You miss getting beat up as well. So really,
I know the feeling.
I've got to tell you that my body feels so good not doing jiu-jitsu at the moment. I shouldn't be saying this, but I can walk upright, my neck, I can look both ways. My knees are still dodgy, but the rest of me is actually pretty good. But I'd still go roll today if I could.
Yeah, I know. That's my life revolves around my family, work, and training with other people. And since I can't train with other people, there's really a huge hole in my world, in my life, and I feel that too. Even though I was just a very small group of people, we are very much like family. We take care of each other. We push each other hard in the gym and punch each other in the face and twist each other's necks and try and make each other hurt. But at the same time, we do it to help each other grow, and there's a camaraderie and there's a feeling that doesn't happen anywhere else. And so when you don't have that, yes, we can do these other kinds of training to kind of keep us going, but it's only to keep us going until we get that back, because until we get that back, when it's so much a part of your life is incomplete.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. That sense of community is a thing. Huh?
Yeah.
Cool. Chris, anything else? I mean, I think we've taken enough of Fred's time. I think it's getting late here with us, but it's only getting early on his side. So he's probably still got a big, busy day planned ahead. Actually, just lost his feed there. Oh, here we go.
There we go.
Yeah. Chris, anything else from your side that you want to add? Do you want to chat to Fred about?
Well, I could chat to Fred all day, but before we go, like, what gym are you training out of in Kansas? So if there's anyone that's listening that wants to come and join and come and meet you, that would be awesome.
The gym, the name of the gym is called Dragon Family Martial Arts. It's owned by another gentleman, and so I train inside of that gym. And we're in Independence, Missouri, and we're easy to find, and we got lots of room. So.
Oh, that'd be great. You know, if you're not getting new members, you eventually, like the guys start fading, and so it's always important to get new people in the gym.
I could sure use a few.
Hopefully this brings you some, and it's been really nice chatting to you, and thanks for taking the time. And for us, it's a huge honor to have you on the show. And
my pleasure, my honor. I'm glad you asked. It's been nice to meet you both.
Thank you so much. And I see your Facebook, so I'll be on there and I'll be watching everything. And if we can ever do anything for you, please don't hesitate to shout. It's good chatting to you from South Africa.
Thank you. That's the first time I've talked to anybody from South Africa, so that's another first for me. So that's good.
And you're so glad you draw the two of us. Of all the people in South Africa who've spoken to you, get me and Chris. Oh, sorry. Don't judge all South Africans by us, okay? The rest of us are pretty cool, you know. As
far as I'm concerned, you set the bar pretty high.
Thank you so much, Fred. You're kind.
Listen, Fred, thanks so much for chatting with us. It's been great having you here. Yeah, we'll catch up again. I mean, there's obviously so much happening, and it'll always be great to get your input on certain things happening. If there's ever something big, martial arts wise, and we can chat to a true legend of the sport. You know, I mean, you were there right from the beginning, and like you heard it here as well, guys. Anybody listening, Fred 65. He said with enough zeros, he's keen for another fight. So I mean, anybody looking to, you know. Cool, guys. Chris, thanks so much. Fred, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys, and we'll catch up again.
My pleasure. I'd love to talk to you anytime. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.